that's how you would add it to the.
Yeah, cons always adds to the head of the
Yeah. So
list.
cons adds in front, and whatever you want to pack in there. I'm sure you want to pack the continuation in there.
Yeah.
You probably also want to put the tag in there. Right, because how else are you gonna fund? Well, I don't know. You maybe I could think of some other way of doing that because you have the tag here locally. You could attach it as well.
So each time you're just pushing K itself, so that when it pops out, each time it's coming out as K, but I know where K belongs to.
Yeah, so I guess somewhere down here, and I don't know where exactly you're going to do that. You're going to do the opposite, right? So wherever you pop out, eventually you're going to have to do set run the rest like that.
That's to pop out the first
Yeah.
time.
Now, and exactly what you do with K, that's going to happen in the throw. Throw is now going to examine this thing, and it's going to have to make some decision what to do.
When I tested this before, the throw statement executes before the catch, because it's a function inside of a function.
It's your implementation.
No, when I tested the very basics, just to see which one runs first. So the throw is actually a function itself.
It's a function that you're going to write. You're implementing throw.
Right. But if you implement the function, I implement the function just to display some information, and then I ran the test, and I noticed that throw executes before catch.
No, that's catch is a macro. Catch generates a bunch of code. So catch never executes. And so what happens is catch will generate code that looks roughly like this. When you enter this code, inside here it's going to call, some other function. So now we're inside this thing. It will have built up something. Now f gets called, f calls the throw. And then that throw will do whatever you want it to do. Which presumably means it'll take this continuation to get back here. So it is certainly true that throw gets called before you finish this call CC. Before you get out of here. So if over here you would put a print on, can you do print on? I can never remember how to do these things. Print or whatever it is. And this is exactly the behavior that you want from an exception, right? You want f to call something which calls throw, and then you never want to go to this print. That's exactly what an exception is supposed to do. It's going to cut short any of the stuff over here, which after all has relied on something that was violated by the exception.
So,
Yeah.
when you have a throw in your catch handler itself, then the flow won't be, it goes first to the catch and then to the throw.
It doesn't matter. As long as it's not observable. Okay, other questions about this? So, in the interest of simplicity, people have to be grappling with this, what this handler does, and how to feed values to the handler and stuff. And you could, probably first solve the general problem without that nicety, so that you get your basic structure right, and then worry about the handler after you got the basic structure right. That way, you have some incremental way of building up. And so the difficulty again is that catch, what is it called? Try catch is a macro, and so I think if I were to first implement this, just to get my feet wet here, I wouldn't even write the catch macro yet. Throw is a function, so you can implement throw, and you could just by hand write down what that macro is going to devolve to, and you can debug that stuff. And when it's actually debugged, then you can write the macro. Because otherwise it's tedious. When you write the macro and you make something wrong, it's hard to see what it is that went wrong.
throw be a macro?
Oh, anything can be a macro, but throw doesn't have to be a macro. Whereas catch has to be a macro because catch contains stuff that is not evaluated. It contains, for example, the handler. And it contains it not as a lambda. Does it contain it as a lambda?
It is as a handler is like that.
I don't remember. Is catch, whenever you specify, this is a general thing in these languages, whenever you specify some piece of code, so you have some construct, some flow control construct,
No, it's not a lambda.
and then you have some piece of code
Correct.
that happens during this flow, then you have two ways of doing it. You could specify this as a lambda, and in that case, the flow construct can be a regular old function. Or you can specify it not as a lambda, but just as a block of code, and in that case, the flow construct must be a macro. Because otherwise, this thing would be evaluated. So there are two ways of deferring evaluation. I guess you could quote it and then interpret it, but that's inefficient. So in general, there are two ways of doing it. That if you have a lambda, then it's a function, and if it's not a lambda, then it's a macro. And it's just a matter of taste. So I believe that the way I set up the call CC is that the things inside didn't take lambdas. They were just blocks of code, and that tips you off that it must have been a macro. But you can implement it, just by expanding it. Call CC, on the other hand, you can see it's a function because you have the lambda thing here. Could they have done call CC as a macro? Why not?
Macro never actually executes.
Well, the macro generates code. So ultimately, if you remember that fourth, what's an exam? Where do we have a fourth? In the exam? Oh, in the lab? Okay.
As well in the exam, yeah.
Okay. We have the same thing in the exam and the lab.
Yeah.
Okay. And okay. So
A different version.
yeah. So in the four, the stuff that was inside, it was just a block of code, no lambda. And then the four generated code that executed this thing as part of a map by packing it inside a lambda. But the difficulty with call CC is that call CC doesn't just get a block of code. It also gets a piece of information with which the code is run. And that would be harder to do in the macro. And it gets that dynamically as the code is run. Similar to the continuations that we had in the web programming, where it got a magic cookie when it was invoked. So when you have a block of code that not just gets run, but also needs to get some information, the continuation, the magic string, whatever, then it really becomes better to use a lambda. Even though we dislike the syntax, I mean, looking at the lambda, as I can tell when people come to my office and they say, call CC takes a function whose parameter is a function that takes it, and at that point people's minds go a little soft. So it's not a great syntax, but it is a good mechanism for getting both code and something that gets fed in later. Yeah.
I noticed on your column 3 it says implement as a macros or functions. Is there any advantage of using either or? Because I decided to use both functions.
Yeah, like I just said, you can't have catch as a function. It's not going to work because the thing that it consumes is a block of code that you don't want to have evaluated as the function gets called. And this gets us back to, let me do this in slow motion because it has a bearing on problem 1. So if you have a function, say catch, and you want to make it as a function, okay? And now it has, what what is the first argument?
The expression?
Which expression?
The action.
The action,
Yeah, actually.
and then we have the tab, and then we have the handler. No lambda.
No.
These are the,
All right. So now you say you're going to make it as a function.
Actually, the handler.
handler has a lambda.
Well, the handler has a lambda. Oh, interesting. But this one doesn't have.
No.
Oh, the handler has to have a lambda because it gets information. Okay, but this one here has no lambda.
Actually, action is defined as a lambda, not in here.
When in
But
this in
action
the
outside.
syntax,
So,
is there lambda? Okay, I'm just going to have to look it up.
Yeah.
I have unreliable informants.